check the sound. The sound.
Oh, the sound of what? The sound of silence?
No. The
Hello,
intro.
darkness, my old friend. I've
I
come to welcome you again.
don't know if that's the words. You're Simon and Garfunkel. It might be a little off tonight.
I don't give a shit.
Hey, you rock on, Christopher York.
All right, wait a minute. I'll test the soundboard. Okay.
That's what I'm talking about, because we usually do that. We're getting out of order here.
Right. Yeah. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard it.
All right. Soundboard's working then.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, we're all good there. It's a wonderful world. So tonight, Holly, what are we talking about tonight? Stuff?
We're gonna have a little chat.
Oh, okay.
A
little something.
Little something. A little meeting of the minds. You know, our weekly check-in.
No. All right.
Yeah, you wanna talk about
The stuff?
Talk about stuff? Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Delve slip into the night. I love doing this. Going down real low and bringing in the soft sounds of musical star streams. I always go back to that. Now, this is Slip Into the Night, episode 8. Is it 8?
I think it is 8.
I think I labeled it wrong then. I probably fucking did. I'm gonna have to fix it.
It might be.
No, it's 8 because we did 6 and 7. I think I'll check it after the show. Anyway, Fae Folk and Fairies. Welcome to the program. We'll also try to get you into some transcendental meditation by the end of the show, and hopefully I can hypnotize you over the radio to dance like a chicken in the middle of the road. But until then, Fae, Folk, and Fairies. I don't know much about this subject.
I was surprised when I gave you kind of the things that I was thinking about, that this is what you picked to talk about this week.
Well, interesting. Fun fact. I always wanted to get a tattoo of a naked fairy.
Hot. That's interesting.
Like with his penis hanging out. No.
Really? I didn't think that.
No. No, it was I had I think I still have it somewhere. Probably not. I think I have the actual I have the actual stamp itself, but I used to have a rubber stamp of a fairy that I would put in all my books that I found. It was a really cool, intricate picture when you stamped it onto the ink pad and then put it onto the paper. It's pretty cool. I'll have to show it to you sometime. I think I have it somewhere.
So would that be like the Tinkerbell type fairy from Disney?
No. It's a little bit more elaborate than old Tinkerbell, but
the same idea with like the wings and the
the wings, tiny little, chick. Probably a lot sexier than Tinkerbell, I'm thinking. I'm damn well pretty sure. But I'd always wanted to get one. I just never had. I don't know if I could just never find one that I had wanted to get. Or I just wound up always getting other shit. Which now I'm covered in a bunch of shit. So, although my back's fixed, kinda. So, but I mean, you would lay it out I don't know, like 4 or 5 different topics for me. And one of them was, Fae Folk and Fairies. And
Mhm.
like I said, while I'm not like super knowledgeable on it, like
Mhm.
it is something that I am interested in,
Mhm.
and have had some. I have delved into some of that um, in my research over the years.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a huge subject area, actually, especially mythologically, and it's like almost every culture has kind of one of these humanoid type nature spirits that are in their mythologies. Culturally, we're most familiar with like the Tinkerbell type, uh, kind of like the pixie fairy, the small winged humanoid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's what most people think of when they think of fairy, spelled Fairy.
Right.
It's also spelled Faery, and
Right.
sometimes they're referred to as the Fae.
Whoa. Your voice went crazy, so you might want to repeat what you were saying.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it does that. Excuse me. I don't know if it's something with the StreamYard or whatever, but yeah, every so often it's happened for you. I know
Hmm.
that.
Yeah. I know Steve Alcorn was upgrading his microphone. Maybe it's time for me to. I'm not going to shop online during the show for a new microphone, but
They're actually it's not that expensive to get a decent studio quality microphone.
mhm.
The question is in how it looks aesthetically.
Mhm.
So, and I can talk to you about that after the show. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I know that's diverging, but what I was talking about is that we know them as generally as fairies,
hmm
um, with the spelling Fairy. Sometimes it's spelled Faery or Fae, which is kind of from the Celtic tradition of calling these non-human beings that are associated with the elements and with the earth and nature as fae. Um, and they are often kind of categorized by the type of element that they have an affinity for. So, an earth nature spirit or fairy would be something like a gnome, which there's like the garden gnomes that you see, the
oh yeah,
little statues are depictions of something that has like a really deep um, European
yeah, and
tradition of.
I know like elves are also supposed to be considered part of the Fae.
Hmm. Yep. And they are often associated with like plants or tree groves. And so they are also another one of these nature spirits. Um,
Mushroom rings.
Mushroom rings. Yep. If you go out into the forest, you might see a ring of mushrooms, and they have like fay trees, which are
hmm
sometimes like uh, trees that are or fairy trees that are. That's
Frank
oh
Smith. Frank Smith, who's from Ireland, by the way, he's
yeah.
Irish. He's gonna voice the new intro for the Freudian slip for me. Uh,
Ooh.
so coming from him, the Fae come in all shapes and sizes.
Yes. Yep. All different categories, lots and lots of different names. No, like you said, we've mentioned the gnomes, the elves. I did a kind of look online. We've mentioned the pixies. There are like in
Brownie.
brownies, um,
Excuse me.
dobbies or dobs. That's a character that J.K. Rowling took for her Harry Potter books, but there is actually a fairy um, type. There are the kappas, which are Japanese water
Yep.
beings. There's undines. You would um, you could call mermaids and the mer people also as a type of fairy. There's in the air, there's sliffs. Salamanders are fire fairies. There's things called red caps and other. Some of them is a type of fairy that is not so benevolent. It's a malevolent one, and that's one of the things is that sometimes they go from just being kind of a trickster type of a being like a leprechaun to some things that are actually very malevolent. There are lots of tales of hauntings that are attributed to not human ghosts or spirit, but intelligent hauntings attributed to elemental fairy type beings, which are considered rare, but they are they have things that have been attributed to that. So this is not my but with
You
the shamanism,
your voice went crazy there for a second again.
it did.
Yeah.
So I was just saying that this is not necessarily my area of expertise, since I'm more comfortable with the shamanic type of stuff. But with the shamans, we do interact with what we would call a nature spirit. We recognize and respect non-human nature type intelligences. And with our ceremonies would interact with them. And one of those examples would be with like mountain spirits or apus.
Right.
In South America, they're called apus, are kind of like the consciousness of the great mountains. And whether shamanism would work with the intelligences of the clouds and the with the air, so kind of like those air elementals.
Yeah, it runs the gamut with these creatures. Like
Yeah.
in in your traditional folklore, they're all over the place.
Yes. You've got the
And
trolls and gremlins.
and then you can go into like fictional stories. Like I know you and I have both read the Jim Butcher books. Which
Yes.
he goes into like this whole like hierarchy of the Fae folk and like and there's a lot of those types of fictional stories that bring these beings into into the fold. um you know a lot of the Dungeons and Dragons creatures are based on the Fae folk or fairies or whatnot. It's pretty inundated in our culture, all over.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
So, but my big question with it is, are these things, a symbolic thing? Are they something, is this an energy thing again? Is this or could this be, could this be one of these things where it's one of these beings that it's there, but we just can't perceive it?
Right.
Sort of thing. Like I always go back to the Joe Rogan uh fart alien. I don't know if it's an analogy. Is it an analogy? Where if you fart in a room, like people can smell it. They can't see it. They know it's there. Maybe there's a creature like that that like it's there and like we can't see it, but we can sense it in some other way.
Right. Yep.
And it exists differently than we do.
Right.
So is it something like that? I don't know. I don't know if those types of things exist. These are questions that I ask all the time.
Yeah.
Being that I do 2 different shows basically now about weird shit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, and it's interesting where it kind of somewhat overlaps with the alien phenomenon, because some of the fairies there's a tradition that if they will steal human children, and replace them with some of their own children. It's like that changeling phenomenon. And it's not exactly the same, but it's kind of similar where, you know, there's those tales of aliens coming and like abducting people or um, interfering with human reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like,
Well, and there's always talks about like these different creatures, reproducing with people and creating these like demi-humans,
yes,
or like these weird hybrids. You
yes,
hear about that all the time in the old folklore or legends, tales, what have you, whatnot. It's all throughout it.
yeah. So what they have, they're considered magical, but what extent is their magic just advanced technology? If they are an actual phenomenon, we don't know. Are they just a different kind of, you know, being that's evolved on the earth, but maybe slightly more advanced? And then, they are able to evade our detection. Um,
Right.
are they living in the earth or in the deep ocean or in places that we just can't detect them? Or are they just really a way to explain natural phenomenon
Right. Are
and
these,
things that
or were these things, stories for them to tell kids,
mhm,
to help, keep the kids in line? There was a lot of those stories that were told and passed down from generation to generation,
mhm, yeah,
you know, um, to keep kids in line or whatever. Uh, and a lot of that stuff stays true to this day. I mean, to this day, we still tell children, you got to be good, or else Santa isn't going to bring you anything for Christmas because he knows who's naughty and nice. He has magic.
mhm. Yeah, and he has a whole workshop full of elves. So
Motherfucker's got magic.
yeah, 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 he does. He got flying reindeer. I mean,
God damn. There's some criminals that would like to have their hands on that fucking magic shit.
right? Um, and they are also that there are a lot of trickster stories where they are tricking humans
Mm-hmm.
for various purposes. Like, don't make a deal with a fairy because they will always win. It's like going to Las Vegas; the house always wins. The
Yep.
fairies always win. So don't make a deal with the fairies, or be very careful to the leprechaun that has is hiding his pot of gold, and you have to it's nearly impossible to ever win the gold, but he might try to trick you out of something.
Hmm.
Um, and kind of dangle his riches out there. Lots of like the story of the shoemaker's shoes, where he has like little brownies in his house and he leaves them out food and they do his work for him. And they
Yeah.
and as long as he's feeding them and taking care of them and honoring them, they'll do his work for him and bring good luck. But if he ever like tries to see them or um then they disappear. you know
Yeah.
they have these kind of rules about them in the stories, which is kind of like this interesting thing that along with the folklore is that there is a certain way to interact with the different beings
Right. With each
through
and each one has a different way that you interact with it.
yes,
Which I mean, it gets fucking confusing.
right. And then a lot of them say that they do not like man-made metals. I don't really fully understand what that's about.
Hmm.
It's just one of those things with the stories is
I
the
wonder if
fairy.
that's the thing that harkens into the whole undead folklore, like vampires, um, werewolves, because vampires were originally supposed to be hurt by metal, um, and like silvers, your pure metals.
Right.
Same thing with your werewolves. Um, but I'd be curious to know if that's something that which way that went.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
Yeah. One of the stories that you had done on the 40 Slip recently, the one in Kentucky with the, I can't remember what the name of it was, but they had it was like the mischievous aliens that are, they're shooting up the house because they're
Oh, they were
outside.
outside the house, yeah, and they shot the shit out of that place.
And when I heard that story, I didn't think necessarily aliens. I thought though that sounded a bit like some of the mischievous fairies, and they
Yeah.
do have tales of being in like colored light orbs as well. Um, that could be misinterpreted as a UFO, possibly. Um,
Well,
you know,
this just in from
so
Frank Smith, Holly. My grandmother told me if you catch a leprechaun, you can't take your eyes off him when he is bringing you to his pot of gold. Once you take your eyes off him, he will disappear. That's straight from an Irishman, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, yeah. Um, that is very
Frank's probably
consistent.
laughing his ass off right now.
I know he's probably like the best expert, and he's like just chiming in and listening to us, like fumbling through
He's
our.
just like, he's just like fucking Lucky Charms eating motherfuckers.
But it's true. Like they have almost all the different types of fairies out there, though they are able to vanish. And they seem to have this some kind of either teleportation or interdimensional aspect to them, where they are kind of morph in or morph out, and maybe are able to change shape or form.
Mm-hmm.
In really the Irish tradition of the Celtic fairies is really it is goes back so far, and that one of my shaman mentors has gone to Ireland and worked with an Irish shaman, and they interact, and they have like fairy spots still in Ireland that they are aware of, and uh, you know those who practice that know these spots, and you know the stories that I've told still interact with the fairy beings in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
So who's to say that they are not in other locations, and we have just lost that?
Well, I myself personally wonder, like, what is it? Like,
Mhm,
is it a real thing? Is it an energy thing? Is it a, is it a like we were talking about before? Is it a being that
mhm,
we can't perceive?
right.
Something that we don't understand yet? I mean, it could be any number of things, or is it just a tale? A little, a little thing to tell your kids, about these different little things. Was it done as warnings about nature and how to conduct yourself? I don't know. I don't know the answers to any of these questions. So it's just things that I ask.
Mhm,
What were these things? Or what are they? Do they exist on a physical level,
mhm,
or are they more of just you know an idea?
mhm,
And I don't know. I know there are whole magical traditions that are
mhm,
based around fairies,
right.
and like there's been like whole fantasy styled um, uh, systems
Mhm,
where like people go crazy with it. Like there's dragons and fairies, and they have it all worked out. And hey, and I'll be the first one to tell anybody, if it works for you, go for it. It's an artistic form of prayer.
mhm,
You got to find the thing that works right for you. And it may not always be what is the fit for everybody else. But yeah, there's like this whole like religious sects that what they do, their deity base is all
mhm.
like fairies.
Right. Well, it was definitely picked up with the kind of like the New Age movement, where fairies were kind of, I guess I would say, adopted in or taken as one of these like alternative,
Brought back into
um,
the fray.
yeah, brought back into the fray. Where for a while there, I think around the 1800s, 1900s, it was like, okay, this is totally a made up thing. It's a totally a fairy tale. And then there was more of a New Age movement, looking back into the kind of the older, um, alternatives to Christianity with some of the older, pantheons, like the Greek pantheon, the Celtic gods, and part of that is, the nymphs, the fairies, and they kind of got reimagined, and often is like kind of these like really beautiful, almost angelic type beings.
Like your dryads.
Hmm. And you can see that with like, in like tarot cards, right? They have There's like fairy tarot with like the very
Oh
beautiful
yeah.
artwork, and it kind of they did this with angels too, where angels
Mhm.
became like these very kind of beautiful mystical things, and they made all the like tarot cards and paintings, and it, this kind of almost paradise type alternate reality with all these kind of magical beings in it, which kind of ignores the fact that, in mythology, fairies tend to be very mischievous. They kind of are, you know, have minds of their own. They can be these trickster spirits, and some of them are like really downright can be, nasty and definitely demand their due respect.
Mhm. I was just trying to look up some fairy tarot cards.
Look up Doreen Virtue,
Oh,
who was this
the
interesting,
people.
huh?
Well, I was looking up some different things. Oh, here we go, right here. This is
She did like angels and fairies, and was talking about, seeing fairies and in her meditations and stuff like that. And it's really interesting. And then like about last year or so, she kind of had a kind of a big conversion back to Christianity, and told people to like burn all the tarot cards that she ever sold them. And it left a lot of her fan base, because
All right, here we go.
she probably made millions off of this, as being like, well, what do we do? What do we do now? Like, we loved what you were telling us, and now you're telling us it's all fake, and that it's
Yeah,
like sinful, and it was like a big illusion. And then, she sold books and all kinds of
yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
A
You
lot
know,
of
it,
people
it
do that. So
yeah.
yeah, that's the that's one of the sets of fairy tarot cards
Yep.
there. And I'm not a huge fan of anything beyond the rider weight style decks. And the reason why is because tarot cards were created symbolically, and the
Yeah.
symbols have meaning.
Hmm.
Now, if the cards are done in a style that follows the same symbolism as
Right.
is on those, the cards as we know them, then I think that can be those can be useful.
Hmm.
But tarot cards were created. The symbolism is it's done for a reason.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I kind of have issue with any of these like these weird offshoot fucking tarot decks. Every time I go into like a bookstore or something, I have to go look at them. I have to.
Well,
It's a fucking obsession. I have to go look at all the fucking weird ass styled tarot cards that they have.
some of
But
the
here's
art, the
but
the artwork is downright beautiful. Like,
right, but
you know,
here's the other thing too. Now, also think that if you want to use a style of cards that is different from tarot cards, then you need to find out what those cards mean to you. If the symbolism is different.
well, I absolutely agree, and I think it should really be what things mean to you in your own kind of symbolism, kind of like dictionary. Do you know what I
Mhm,
mean? Like,
mhm.
just because this, a a rose means love doesn't mean that when you see a rose, that's what that symbolizes to you. Maybe you don't like roses, or they
No,
remind you of your grandmother, and they
but
just
when you're utilizing tarot cards for magical purposes, I'm not talking about divining. Divining is a totally different thing, and especially for other people, because I've talked about this before. That's more of a reading of the person than it is anything else. It's the symbolism that's important.
Mhm.
That's what you're focusing on. Like anytime I ever use tarot cards for magic, and it's weird that we get off on this tangent. We'll get back to fairies in a second, but you know, I don't I see them as a tool, and that the symbolism that's in that deck is for a certain purpose.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And like so many people utilize all these other decks while using the interpretations for the symbolism for the Rider-Waite deck.
Mhm.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because everybody uses the blanket interpretations for the cards,
Mhm.
but the cards will run the fucking gamut.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I have an issue with it. And
Mhm.
and like I said, it's a fixable issue if you're, if you want to take the time to do it. You just have to rework how you look at the cards.
Mhm.
If you're using like the Rider-Waite deck, I said the Rider-Waite deck was used primarily by the Golden Dawn,
Mhm.
and has been the standard for a long time. Like that's what almost everything is based on,
Mhm.
and there is a reason behind that.
Mhm.
But anyway, I what's the word? I digress.
You
I
digressed.
digress.
So back on the topic of
Fairy tarot cards.
fairies. It was. I think that the whole kind of divining energy thing might be a very kind of pixie fairy type thing to do.
Oh yeah.
But on another angle of it is that they all tend to be very associated with nature. And one thing that I see in like reading and doing the research is that there is this like eco consciousness thing, and it brings in the fairies. Like the fairies, they keep the earth clean, and they clean
Yeah.
up man's pollution, and
They're
Mother Earth
friends
is
of the environment.
right. Mother Earth is burdened, and it's the elementals that clean up the earth, and I don't.
Yeah, I don't
Whoa.
I don't think we can put that much responsibility on them.
Wow, what was that?
What was what?
Oh, I get you didn't hear that music that kinda came in. It was something really weird.
No.
Okay.
There was music?
This is such a weird show tonight. I think trickster spirits are playing with us.
Could be.
All of a sudden, this, like, really upbeat, like my computer started playing this really upbeat, like, classical music. It was, like, weird. I
Huh,
thought
I
it
didn't
broadcasted across
No,
the whole show.
I didn't catch it. Hopefully YouTube doesn't. Doesn't matter on the other side on Anchor. But
And I think it was just because I had flipped to do a little research, and I hit a screen that played music, and so I
ah,
apologize if it played across
well,
the show.
no. If it came over your headphones, no, it will not come over the show.
Oh, okay, good,
Oh,
good.
yeah. No.
Whew,
And
what's the release?
thank you to all the listeners out there on Anchor that have been downloading and listening to the show. We appreciate your support. And there have been some people out there who have asked, how they can help support the show. And I, for the longest time, I was just like, oh, just help like share us around and share links and share the show. And and people they would do it for a little while, and then they would just, they would just falter off, or But I've had people ask all the time, and I did start the my eBay store. So on eBay, if you look for Blue Elf Books, it's with 3 O's because I fucked it up when I made it. Blue Elf, it's like ebay.com, I think / Blue Elf Books with 3 O's. Any of the stuff that I'm selling on there, if you purchase it, there's a lot of high price stuff on there. I have a lot of stuff that I'm trying to sell really high price because it sells at that. So, but there is lower price stuff on there. If people want to support the show that way, they can do it that way because that stuff supports it's income for me, which I put into this shit. So, there's that. And they opened up on Anchor for me, which is Anchor is the podcast service that I use to upload the show so that you guys can download it through whatever you download it through, whether it be Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify, whatever the case may be. They opened up listener support. So there's a link. I think I posted it in the 40 and Slip like page, but you can donate whatever you want. Excuse me. And they have different plans. Like I think like the lowest one is like 99 cents a month. But if you want to support the show, you can do it that way. And it goes all into an account on Anchor for me. And like I'm making money off like I think some ad revenue off the Anchor ad that I was given. But it's doing well. Like the show's been doing well on Anchor, so. And there's a lot of new listeners to the show on Anchor. So, like anybody that wants to support the show, if you'd like to support the show a little more, trying to do things, get into doing a lot more things, for the shows, et cetera, et cetera. Bring some other stuff to the table, so to speak. So, and I have over the years, slowly. It took me a while, but here we are.
Talking about fairies.
That's right. Talking about fairies. So yeah. But to get back to, I personally just don't know what they are. So
Right.
I don't know how we categorize them. And I think it's interesting that they run the gamut like this. You will find them everywhere. They are in, a folklore all over Asia, Europe,
Absolutely.
Africa,
South America.
South America, the Native Americans of America, the Inuit. You will find tales of some type of these strange creatures. Like I didn't realize I was doing something for the 40 and Slip years ago. The Inuit had it was like a weird creature that came up onto the land. It was like a killer whale type thing that became like a land creature that killed people.
Wild. Wow.
Like they had some really weird creatures in their folklore. And I may be misspeaking on that one, but it gets really fucking strange. So you see all these types of strange creatures throughout in Native Americans in throughout North America.
Yep.
You have tales of little people.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
And if you want to tell me that those are not so similar to other tales of like brownies, like the stuff of that nature, sprites, fuck off.
Yes.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
And their stories are so similar, it's uncanny. In some cases, the way they talk about these things in comparison to the way some of these other cultures talk about these things. Again, I hate to go back to Ancient Aliens, but when they talk about like all these different friggin' places all over the globe, like having all this same shit, it isn't just the fucking architecture.
No.
So I think it's very interesting that it's all over. and I think it's worth looking at. But I don't know, like I said, if it's just stories or if there's something to it. I don't know. I don't know, Holly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know how we're gonna know without um some credible, researchable,
Frank, why don't you fucking catch a goddamn leprechaun? Man
right?
up. Put on that goddamn Spider-Man costume you had on the other day, tactical Spider-Man outfit, and go catch a goddamn leprechaun. Let's put this shit to bed. God love him.
Right, but they, a lot of the ghost hunters, they sometimes attribute some types of intelligent hauntings to elemental fairy type creatures, but other than, I don't know how that they are really demonstrating that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. Like the ghost stuff I get on edge. I get on edge.
Really?
Yeah, see,
Make me
ghost stuff is a weird subject for me,
really.
especially with ghost hunter shows and ghost
Mm,
hunters in general.
mhm.
I see a when I see ghost hunter, like I see bullshit. I don't see anything real. You show me a ghost hunter show, I see bullshit. 100% of the time. I don't ever see anything that's real. Ghost hunter shows, bullshit. That's my opinion. Um, we welcome yours, I suppose. But
Mm,
I don't buy into that. I don't know if there are I don't know what it is. I've said it before in the 40 and
mhm.
stuff. I don't know that if ghosts are just leftover resonant energy, which that I could buy.
Mhm.
Like that we as human beings are so fucking habitual. And if you pay attention to yourself, you'll realize how habitual you really are and how vulnerable you are. Like that's the
Mhm.
one thing I realized when I sat down one day and realized how habitual I was about everything I did every single fucking day.
Right.
That if a serial killer or somebody paid attention for a week, they'd know my schedule. And then they'd be able to fucking knock me off with no problem.
Right.
We just get so habitual.
Mhm.
We fall into those routines. But I don't know, I got lost. I'm a little high, so I don't know where I was there.
Well, I think you're talking about and I'm giggly and I am not high, so I'm just tired. Having worked all day. But I think where you're going is, with ghost huntings and
Oh, yeah, yeah. No,
yeah.
we're so habitual that we just we do these same things over and over and over again. We're always doing this thing that at this time and this thing. And there are things around us, which are like
Mhm.
uh, quartz crystals, things like that. They store pattern
Mhm.
vibrations. And
Agreed.
I could totally buy that these things are leaving leftover things, these leftover imprints.
Mhm.
That I could buy into. Ghosts, I don't know. I will tell this story. Um, it's off subject of the fairies, but it kind of ties in a little bit. So when my grandmother was dying, I she got cancer in 2009. Well, actually, she got it before then. But one of the pisses about it was no one told me.
No.
Um, there was a great deal of people in my family that knew, and I wasn't told. Um, I don't know if it was done for what reason. I don't know. I don't really give a shit anymore. I'm not one to hold that over other people. Um, but when when she was passing, like she had pretty much like stage 4 lung cancer, and it just wasn't she wasn't coming back. Like she was just gonna go, and she had accepted that. She wanted to die at home. So I was going out to visit her all the time, and I was trying not to make because so many people would go out there and they just sit and sit and sit and sit and sit and sit and sit with her, like, and not leave. Like I could tell it was wearing on her, so like I would go in and I would just like sit with her for like 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, shoot shit with her, and then leave. Love you, bye. And I was going out there. I was living far away from there, so I was traveling out there all the time, and I was tired as fuck. So there's one night I went home and I was sleeping. I had this strange dream, and in the dream, I was sitting across a campfire from my grandfather. My grandfather's been dead since like 82, 83. And in the dream, he said to me, there's a big thing in my family. My grandfather had a ton of property, and all of his children were just fucking fighting over it. So in the dream, my grandfather said to me, he's like, "Hey, I really want you to tell my children at your grandmother's funeral how disgusted I am with them." And I was like, "What?" In the dream, I'm like, "I can't do that. Are you fucking insane?" And he's like, "Christopher, I need them to understand how upset I am with them." And I'm like, "I can't do that. There's just no fucking way I can do that." And he's like, "Yes, you can. Your grandmother and I will be there with you." And it hit me pretty hard because I didn't know. I was just like, I don't know. What was that? This was a weird dream. It wasn't just like a dream. It was a weird dream. It's one of those dreams where you wake up and you're like, what the fuck was that?
Mm-hmm.
Did I dream that? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I devised a way to do this. So I wound up writing up this thing to read to my family. My grandmother was a huge fan of poetry, so I wrote a poem, and I took it to her and I let her read it. And my one regret was I never told her why I wrote it. I always thought that if I had told her that her ex-husband, my grandfather, came to me in a dream, well, not ex-husband, her dead husband, excuse me, had come to me in a fucking dream, that she'd have freaked out. She was very Christian. And after she read it, she's like, I asked her, I said, "Can I read that at your funeral?" And she was like, "Why? Why then?" And I said, "Because a good speaker once said that if you want people to listen to you, make sure they're uncomfortable." And she was like, "Yeah." She's like, "I just have one caveat. Your Uncle Stephen has to say, okay, he's let me live here. And if he says, okay, I'm fine with it." So I took it to my Uncle Stephen, and my Uncle Stephen read it, and he said, "Yeah, absolutely." So, because there were certain portions of people that were saying things, and Stephen knew and understood what I was trying to say, and he was okay with it, even though he was kind of part of the problem. With the land stuff, they all are. But so she was fine with it. And when I read it that day, I don't know. I felt like something was there, but I can't tell you that my grandparents were there. I don't fucking
Mm-hmm.
know. I can tell you that I was completely shocked that I was able to read through that without a tear. Not a single fucking one. I'm a very emotional guy. A year later, when my uncle passed away, I bawled. I couldn't even make it. And I didn't even speak at his funeral. I lost my shit. But that day, I was able to hold it together all day. All day. All through that. Not a waiver, and I was shocked by it. I was shocked. I was like, how the fuck did you do that? How? That was the thing. So it was one of those moments where I was like, was that something else?
Mm-hmm.
That me? Those are the times when I question things because I'm a skeptical guy. I have a rational mind, which fucks up a lot of cool shit for me. You know?
I
But this,
know.
but this was one of those moments where I was like, I don't know that I talked to my dead grandfather. It's probably the only moment in my life I'm ever going to talk to my dead grandfather. But it was the coolest fucking thing. That dream, to sit across to be able to have that experience of sitting across the fire from him as an adult. I only knew him as a child. He died when I was like 7.
Mm-hmm.
My experiences with him are very limited, and like the last year plus a little more of his life, he was on oxygen, sat in a chair, and didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of have that experience was really because I was always interested in him. I was always like curious about him. I didn't know much about him,
Mm-hmm.
and so to have that was kind of interesting. But I like I said, and this goes back to the whole fairy thing. I don't know. Could there be something out there that is an actual being? I don't know. You talk to people who have done who have taken DMT trips, they will tell you that when they do that drug, they talk to and they interact with interdimensional fucking beings.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it is not just one person, it is not a handful of people, it is almost fucking across the board. And I can
Yes.
tell you from fucking personal experience taking mushrooms that there
Mm-hmm.
is something there.
Yes.
I don't know what it is, but there's something there. And I think it deserves more exploration. And I think people need to get off this fucking high horse of drugs are all bad. Like, fucking kudos to what was it? Colorado just fucking legalized mushrooms.
Mm.
Did they legalize
Yeah.
mushrooms? Fucking let's go do some mushrooms. Fuck.
I think the difficulty is really what kind of how much evidence do there's a lot of personal experience, but there's nothing that you can really have right now. I can't think of any kind of evidence that you can say this is my experience, in in short of like producing something which may not be a physical being,
Mm-hmm.
and so it kind of is in the realm of if it's a non-physical energy being, like you really kind of have to personally experience it, and and it may have to just rely on personal experience, you know um my own personal experiences with energy beings are in somewhat in the shamanic realm, and also in some of my other metaphysical trainings, and outside of human type spirit interaction. There has been a number of times when I have been in classes with other people doing kind of psychic mediumship work, and they have said, I know this is really going to sound odd, and this has happened to me twice by two people who did not know each other,
Mm-hmm.
but they have said two separate people giving me quote unquote psychic readings, you have a gnome that follows you around. I'm like, what? One of those like red-headed, pointy-headed, not
Fucking
pointy-headed.
Travelocity gnome. You're gonna take a
Yes,
trip. It means you're gonna take a
Travelocity.
trip. That's what that is. That's just symbolism. You're gonna book a flight
I'm gonna book a flight.
and a hotel.
Yeah. I'm gonna have a little. Every time I like plan travel, I'm gonna have a little jingle that comes up.
And you're gonna get really stoned.
Right? I'm gonna have maybe a really great garden too. I hope. Like where does that come from? Like that is not like if I'm gonna go and tell someone, you know, that's not the first thing I'm gonna pick out of a hat. Like first, I'm gonna do your psychic reading, and oh, by the way, you have a
You have a
a
gnome that
gremlin who
follows
lives in your.
Oh, gremlin! I could go for that, man. Stripe.
Are you sure it's not something like a?
Don't fucking throw that goddamn son of a bitch in the pool. I don't need that problem.
Mm.
Keep that son of a bitch in a cage like a chupacabra.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, I could go for having a gremlin. Gremlins could be considered fae.
Absolutely.
Fucking yeah.
Yep.
Damn Skippy. There's so many of those damn things. It's crazy. And when when I say like the whole Dungeons and Dragons like creature selection, like they release these things like the monster manuals, like which would go through all of the monsters that you could have in your Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, and so full of fey creatures.
Oh yeah, yep.
It's just front to back, and it's so cool, like all that different shit. But like I said, I just don't know how much of it is based in reality, symbolism, story, tales, legend. I think, but I do think that a lot of that stuff, like I said, with the whole DMT thing, with the fact that you have so many people coming back from these experiences and saying, I feel like I spoke to something. That's significant. And it's worth taking a look at least. At least let's take a look at it. The stuff that they're doing with MDMA, with post-traumatic stress with soldiers is amazing. I think that needs to continue. Like I said, people need to get off this whole thing of all drugs are bad. The stuff that they're doing with mushrooms, with psilocybin, and with different mental health issues, is it's staggering the results that they're getting with some of this stuff, and it needs to continue.
Yeah, especially like the microdosing stuff and how it helps stabilize some mental health disorders, and there's a great need for safe, effective treatments that are that are affordable as well,
right,
and not like highly chemical.
these types of drugs like psilocybin and stuff like that, they do not hurt you. They're not going to you're not going to have adverse side effects from them. I don't know as far as with the MDMA what they're doing with that, and I do not know what the side effects from MDMA are. But when it comes to your psychedelics, by and large, your real psychedelics, your natural based psychedelics, they're not going to hurt you. And they can be effective tools. I've said for a long time now that I got to a point, I started partying on mushrooms, and I got to a point where I realized that it wasn't that anymore. It was way more of a learning experience, and it was something that I would do only every once in a while to just kind of chill out and go for the ride. And then after you're done with it, you have to kind of like process it. So I think that it's very worth looking into, especially like I said, to go get back to the whole idea of these fae fairies, these type of beings. Is there something out there, and does that, because a lot of times when it comes when they talk about fairies or the fae, there's drugs involved in these legends.
Yes, like potions or mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you know, there's like in South America, lots of times where you take a hallucinogenic drink like ayahuasca and you're talking with the plant spirits
And you're shitting yourself.
and nature spirits and yeah,
And you're puking
or
and shitting yourself. I am not a fan of the whole ayahuasca thing. I do not understand why people want to go down there and drink that shit. And then, from what I've heard, it's so nasty. Like you puke and shit. I guess you trip really good, but no, I'm good. Like I can
yes,
stick to mushrooms, and if I wanted to do DMT, you can smoke it. Um, and I guess it's you get the same effect. It just doesn't last as long.
right,
But yet you're right. In South America, they would take this stuff, and how the fuck they knew how to put these two different plants together?
that don't even grow in the same ecosystems.
Yeah,
That's pretty amazing.
yeah. One's like the drug, and the other one's an MAOI inhibitor that keeps your stomach from destroying it, so that it goes through. It's fucking crazy how they were able to figure this out ages ago. And
Mhm,
that's the type of stuff where you go back and you say, where did they get this information from?
mhm.
And people always go to that ancient aliens bullshit, which I don't buy into.
Mm,
Like, I'm a fan of alien shit, but I don't buy into ancient aliens. I just don't do it.
mhm,
I think there are other more viable options that are that can be apparent. But what was it? How the fuck did they know how to put that shit together?
mhm,
That's the question that I have, because
mhm.
that's one that's hard for me to wrap my head around. How did these jungle natives figure out that, like you were saying, from two separate ecosystems, this one plant here, this one plant here, we put these together, we get this really potent fucking drug that makes us see fucking crazy shit. How did that happen?
It's a question for perhaps another episode.
Could be. We should do a whole show on hallucinogens. I should do a whole. I've been thinking about this. I got thinking about this. I don't know
You
how I
you
would do it.
you would have to be more of the expert there. I know nothing
Right.
other than
Well, yeah. Well, but here's the other thing that I've thought about doing with this, because I thought it would be an interesting experiment. But I don't know, because every time I've thought about doing something on mushrooms, it always goes awry. But here's the thing. So I thought about actually doing a show on mushrooms,
mhm.
but I don't know how well that would work. So, but we could
Uh,
definitely do one on hallucinogens, and I can definitely take the reins on that one. But because I've always thought, where you follow the shamanic path, I've always thought that you should at least dip your toes in there.
mhm.
I know that it's like kind of a far reach for you, but I've always thought you should at least dip your toes in a little bit, because
Right.
it's part of that whole culture. And I know you've said to me before about altering states of consciousness, and that you're more in tune with doing that yourself. But I just
Well,
sometimes think with some of these things, you just need to like I said, when I said I take mushrooms, I let go and I take the fucking ride.
right. And I mean, I think a lot of times they are used to do what's called the shamanic journey, which is kind of like what you're talking about. That's the experience in altered consciousness and perhaps an interdimensional experience. And for me, like I easily do that stuff through sound
Mm-hmm.
with either drumming or rattling and and have those experiences that way. So
Mm-hmm.
and the teachers that I've had have never felt like that a hallucinogenic plant has really been necessary to do a shamanic journey. And the other
It's
part of
not it's not about that.
right, but
It for
but
me, it as far as I'm concerned with that, and the reason why I recommend it to you, okay? My
mhm,
reasoning behind it is the growth and introspection that comes afterwards.
right. So the other part of it that I do know about is a lot of the traditions that I've learned is you do a journey with a plant um to learn about its medicine. So like hemlock, the one I've done is hemlock, and you would drink an infusion of hemlock,
Mhm.
which is kind of like with ayahuasca, but hemlock and this is not the poisonous water hemlock. Don't consume that. That's that will kill you. These
Yeah,
are like
thanks
the
for
big
clarifying.
the like the pine tree, and
Mhm,
you go into that shamanic trance state with the intention of interacting with the energy of that plant and learning what you can from that plant. And this is one way that I think that the like shamanism is one of the oldest forms of spirituality on earth, and I think this is one of the ways that they interacted with the natural world is doing these journeys, either assisted with hallucinogens or through sound.
mhm.
And
I
one
agree.
thing that they did was, besides going and finding power animals and totems and
A
medicine,
lot of them would chant their way to these, you
chant
know,
is another way to
the
do it.
chanting, dancing,
Hmm.
there was all different types of methods. All I'm saying is I think that particular method, and I think mushrooms is a really great method, and there's a I have a bunch of reasons why, but I think it's a great little journey. It's very quick. It goes up, it goes down, you're done. Um, there's no you don't feel like absolute dog shit afterwards, like I have on, so many other things. Um, and it is probably one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had w on a hallucinogen. When I realized what I was really doing with it. Um, but yeah, Frank, don't try this at home, it'll kill you.
Right.
Um, um, yeah, and but I do, I think it's something that should be there are certain people that I think aren't it's not good for, but there are other people that I think that it would be very, very good for. Um, and even the people that I think that it wouldn't be good for, I think it would still be good for in low doses, like you were saying, the whole microdosing idea,
Hmm.
and that what it does to you and how it changes your consciousness. So, I don't know, I just like I said, to get back to the whole topic at hand, like, I wonder if, like, these things open a doorway for us or a window maybe or whatever into the world of the Fae or the
Oh,
fairy.
absolutely. I think that's
That
absolutely
what it
possible.
is that what we're seeing is a glimpse of something else? Because I've experienced some
Right.
pretty crazy fucking shit on mushrooms
Right.
that I can't explain. When you have shared experiences with other people where you're both experiencing the same type of hallucination, it's not normal. Like, that's not something like a mass hallucination shared by people is not a normal thing.
Right. I agree with you.
So
And I've
so
only experienced that once with no hallucinogens, but we
Mhm.
were doing some serious meditation in a
Which can
well,
also produce
we were
altered
do
states of consciousness.
which right, and we were in a really funny like and we were at what's called America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire, which is maybe a whole fake thing, or maybe is a legit site, or maybe it's a combination of a legit prehistoric site that's been made up into a more touristy fake thing. I don't know. for sure, but we were doing some interesting meditations there and went off into another, kind of trance
Dimension.
place and both experienced the same type of beings in this experience, and then came back, quote unquote, to earth, even though we hadn't really left anywhere, but it felt like our energetic parts of us had left our bodies, and then we're like, what did you experience? This is what you That's like
Mhm.
what I experienced. And that is a really trippy thing when you sit down with someone and you compare notes and had no previous plans of playing with anything outside of the norm.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yep. So that's why I wonder, like, what is it that we're touching on when we experience these things, but whether it be through, meditation or drugs or whatnot. What are these things, these places that we're touching on? I don't know. But it is, yeah, it's something that we can explore in another episode. That's for sure.
and certainly though we should, one thing that we've been thinking about too is just getting down and really talking about those megalithic structures and the stone circles, and they,
Yeah.
where they are and what is going on with them.
Do you want to do that next week?
That's an idea for next week. We can talk about that.
I'm down for that. I
You
love
down
talking
for?
about megalithic stuff. I think we should kind of keep it pretty simple.
Yeah.
Probably go with like, try to stick to like just a few of them. But
Or
yeah,
just in general, what's
yeah,
going on with
we can
these?
do it in general. But I mean, like, if we're gonna like go into like into a discussion about them, like, I would say, keep it simple. Like, go Göbekli Tepe, maybe like the pyramids of Giza, and like maybe like one other one. You know what I'm saying? Just keep it simple so that we're not like all
Yeah.
over the place. And
Right.
then,
Well.
or even keep it simple, keep it to one
Yeah.
and do like a whole series of them. We could start
Hmm.
in one place and work our way or however, whatever the case may be. But it's something that you and I can talk about off air.
Absolutely. I
So,
would love to know if any of our listeners ever have had a fairy experience, a fae, gremlin, you know.
yeah, leave a comment on YouTube.
I want to know. I seriously, I really do. I want to know, like, I want
I
to know about that.
personally, as far as I'm aware, I haven't.
Right.
But that that I may be mistaken. I don't know.
Hmm.
So, but on
And
that
I
on that note, Holly, I'm gonna wrap us up.
really, are you wrapping
Um,
wrapping us up together
right. in in a sleeping bag.
in a sleeping bag
Yes.
in
I'm
another dimension, since
in
we're in
another,
like two
yes.
different states here.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we'll definitely talk about the what we're gonna do next week on the show after when we're off here. But, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Slip into the Night, episode 8, Fae Folk and Fairies. Thank you for joining.
Night, y'all.
I listen to this music and I drift off. It's like I've smoked 3 joints, taken a couple melatonin, a Valium. Everything's right in the world. Good night, everybody.
Good night.